4:46? Okay, so I'm not going to be long, but I promise to be somewhat strong. How about that? First and foremost, let me thank Howard University, thank its president, its leadership, for continuing, President Rabeau and his leadership, for continuing to have Howard in this continuing tradition to not only serve as that institution that provides and promotes and then puts out leadership for America and the global community, but also to have discussions such as this to not only speak truth to power, but truth to the powerless. Specifically, I want to thank Dr. Rodney Green and his leadership and his team at the Center for Urban Progress. I believe it was 1995, Dr. Green, correct me if I'm wrong, when this center first started. I was a freshman student here, and I remember that big photo of him standing alongside former Secretary of HUD, Henry Cisneros, and to see where that center has grown and what it's been able to do here in the local D.C. community, but throughout the country, as we've seen here today, has been phenomenal. I also have to thank Dr. Green because he's also a part of my movement family, if you will, and I see other members of my movement family here, Lucy Murphy and a couple others, Darren Fishman and some others, that we've been engaged in these issues for some time. And so I just want to thank you, Doc, because you actually was involved in my first protest here at Howard, 1996. Am I putting you, as the young people would say, Doctor, on blast? This was in front of Newt Gingrich's house, spring 1996. So I thank you for that as well. Appreciate you. You all can clap for that. Good stuff. But I also want to thank you all for the invitation. I'm one who has always been consumed with and have thought about and struggled with this question of power, okay? I'm a political science major. I'm a first-year doctoral political science student. So when Dr. Green asked me to look at this topic, he asked me what I want to speak on. What I said, I just spit it out. I said from victimization to politicization, okay? My esteemed colleague here, tell me your name. Miss Wisdom, Dr. Wisdom. Dr. Powell. Dr. Powell broke down the statistics, all the stats, the numbers, the PTSD, the disproportionate enlistment rates we see among African Americans, all the stats and all the numbers, the disproportionate homelessness. We even know what that statistic itself is twice as large for veterans between the ages of 20 and 24, in comparison to those who are not veterans. So we know, those of us who study, we know the numbers. But the question I'm going to put forth here today is, I'm going to be real short about this, is what are we going to do about it? Okay? We know the numbers, we know the conditions, we know the plight that veterans as a microcosm of the working class within the United States and throughout the world, what they face. What are we going to do about it? So I come to you today not solely as a theoretician or an intellectual, although I am studying for a doctor. I come as one that's been involved in the human rights movement. I come as a practitioner, someone that looks at these issues, and then we struggle and strategize over how best to attack them and how best to eradicate them, how to build a kind of society that we're looking for. So are you down with that? Is that a good thing? Okay. So Lucy asked me, as I was walking in, she said, Jonathan, she's known me for some time. She said, Jonathan, you got to explain something to me. I said, well, she said this Navy thing. For any veteran you meet, they can break it down to you if they're experienced. And trust me, they can break it. Some of them can break it out to the exact second because you can't wait. At least I couldn't to get out of that situation. Where do we start? Let's start with some numbers. I'll give you a few numbers in terms of where we are, in terms of our military and where veterans find themselves. In 1960, some of us float this term, the military-industrial police complex. Many historians credit a former outgoing president with either coining the term or at least putting it out to the masses at large, and I'm referring to Dwight D. Eisenhower. His final speech as he was leaving the White House, he gave a talk that when I watched it, I was astounded that a U.S. president even gave a talk such as that. And want to talk to some people as to what his motivations may have been. But he warned of the incoming military-industrial police complex, the complexities of it, the amount of resources it would strain domestically from the society, and in fact, even the speech went further to say the threats it would bring upon the incoming U.S. population as a result. How does this all tie into this question of economics, right, and really the struggle over resources, question of scarcity within the society in the midst of the greatest power that the world has ever known? Let's talk about this power here. We're talking about 700 military bases throughout 150 countries around the world, okay? This whole question of deficit reduction and cutting costs. If you go to Veterans for Peace homepage right now, and I know some of you got your laptops and whatnot, the numbers right there in terms of the cost of the Afghanistan and Iraq occupations, and the number is climbing as I talk in the hundreds of thousands. The digits are consistently moving. When I left the house today, it was right at $1.4 trillion. Okay, so how significant is that? Well, you have the leadership in the House, which side of the coin you're looking at, but it is a side of the coin that was calling for upwards of $4.6 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years, okay? So that same leadership that would call for $4.6 trillion in cuts, the same leadership that approved, okay, the occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq that cost $1 trillion, all right? So the reason why we have to bring that into the context of this whole question of economics, disparities, and scarcity is, quite frankly, the military, as we know, is not traditionally on the table when they talk about the cuts that needs to be made in the society. When they talk about cuts, primarily they're talking about social spending, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, questions of privatization, this race to the top initiative that we see. We see the closing of schools all over the country. I believe 20 schools here in Washington, D.C., if I'm correct. 20 some odd schools being closed. I'm a product of public schools. 20 schools being closed, that's a heck of a hit, but we also see resistance to that as well. And then we also see the expansion of this military complex under our current president, President Obama, who I know many of us voted for, but we see an expansion for many of us, sadly, on the continent of Africa. We see in 35 countries the U.S. personnel are going to be entering into. It's interesting because when I think about Africa and military intervention, one of the countries that immediately comes to mind for me is Libya. And I was a child when Reagan bombed Libya, and I remember the response that the college students in Atlanta had to that. And so I compare that to what recently took place in Libya. And if you know, the New York Times came out this past Sunday with an article that talked about the grim aspects of the Arab Spring. Many of you may have seen that. But whatever your opinions are on Muammar Gaddafi, I got 7 minutes, I'm gonna take about 2. Whatever your opinions are on Muammar Gaddafi, the New York Times put forth that his ouster, which was supported by the United States, is now leading to the backlash that we see in North Africa today, okay? Take that with a grain of salt. So what can we do? I was politicized, well, before I came to Howard, I was politicized, but I was politicized even more on this campus. And I entered the military, Lucy, at the age of 26, primarily not as a form of patriotism, although I do see myself as a patriot of this country, and at least in its ideals, in the idealistic way. But I entered because I was looking for resources. I wanted to pay off those student loans, and I wanted to access some money for graduate school, and now I'm using my GI Bill to help finance this degree I'm working on now. Be that as it may, because of my politicization, I could not respond to the authoritative, draconian environment in a way that I was supposed to, and also saw there was other people on my ship that felt the same way that I did, okay? But we were just taking the mess as it went along. I was off the coast of Iraq, January of 2006. when some shipmates wanted to play a joke in the shop and just wanted to dangle a hangman's noose in front of my face, you know. So I called up this professor at Howard University and talked to him about what to do about that. And so we started to organize. We started to write letters and organize a little committee right there in my shop. We then got in touch with this gentleman, Dr. David Courtwright, who is a professor in the Kroc School of Peace Studies at Notre Dame, but at the time was a member of a movement known as the GI movement. And so the popular culture is one of mass movements of either long-haired hippies or Black Panthers or Muhammad Ali standing in front of Douglas Hall with his book, A Message to the Black Man, saying he wasn't going to Vietnam. But there's also another movement that has just begun to be documented, the reissue of this book, Soldiers in Revolt, Sir No Sir, which I would encourage everyone to watch, and specifically to send it to someone within the military if you know them. If you know a brother or sister in the military, send them a copy of this DVD and get them connected to this history. But it gives an empowering history of how GIs were able to organize themselves within the ranks of the military. And this mass movement was going on within the military, throughout the civil society, the anti-Vietnam protests. We know what was happening here at Howard University, Columbia University, what have you. I put forth here today that really in order to change the conditions that my colleague laid out for us beautifully is to really build a mass movement. You know, that's what we need. We need a mass movement. You know, I'm thinking about a class last semester I took. How many minutes I have now? 3, okay. I was thinking about a class I took last semester, Dr. Don Davis's class, is a book called We Have No Leaders. I mean, the title itself, get that book, We Have No Leaders. You read that book, Doc? I mean, it's a good book, right? I mean, there's a piece in there. I mean, and essentially the title says, we, as in black folks, have no leaders. Because essentially, post the civil rights movement, all of our leaders, the ones who are honest, take care, have a good one. The ones who were honest and forthright, they either took out, slayed them or COINTELPRO them, or the ones that they could buy off, they did and consolidate them within the system. The point is, we have no leaders. There was this point in the book where he lays it out, and this is what really blew my head open. It shows the progression of the Democratic Party platform from 1968. So in 1968, for example, you had full employment on the actual platform of the Democratic Party, okay? Now I put forth, that's not because the elite or the oligarchy of the Democratic Party really wanted to put that on there. It's because what was taking place in 1968. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without demand. Well, by 1988, the full employment is no longer in the platform. Now, if you know 1988, that's 20 years from 68, okay, that's when about 30% of the delegates at the Democratic Convention were Jackson delegates in Atlanta, Georgia, right? Then we go from 1988 to 2008. We know what happened in 2008. Barack Obama was elected, right? But there's no full employment in the platform. Why? Because there's no movement. You know, there's no mass demand. So I maintain that in order for us to build the egalitarian society we want, stop these massive school closings, 20 schools closing, we see the fight back in Seattle with teachers on the move, for us to bring our brothers and sisters home from all these bases across the world, for us to close these bases, not just bring them home. It's not enough to bring them home. I mean, why is it that we have bases in Germany till this day? Japan. I mean, World War II ended in 1945. I was in Japan. I mean, I spent 3 weeks there. I mean, it's an occupied country. I mean, imagine if there was a Japanese base right outside this university with the imperial flag of Japan right there. I mean, Americans really can't conceive it. So, this is what David Courtwright put forth here. Oh, shucks, look. Hey, I got 1 minute. Join an organization, if you haven't already, that's doing a work for the people. All right, I've been saying that ever since I heard Kwame Terrell here at Rankin Chapel in 1998, February 17th. His piece was, we had to move beyond mobilization to organization. Mobilization seeks influence. Organization ultimately seeks power. Well, that's what we're concerned about. We want power to determine our own destiny, to determine our own lives, and we can't depend on the government structure to give it to us. So I put forth here today that we take it, and I know that after I said this, I began some phone calls to come to a meeting. So thank you. Appreciate you.